Hello, everyone. I hope you are well. It is good to engage you again. I'm hoping that you are doing much of the homework that you are supposed to do to help your life when school resumes, hopefully in a week or two. This presentation will focus on one of the branches of philosophy we engaged. The purpose is to give you some good content you can reflect on whilst you wait to receive the entire course outline, various topics, etc., etc. Now, you know from the previous video that I suppose you would have engaged. If you haven't, you would find that also on the site labeled presentation 1, which is on what is philosophy. It has a bit on how to do philosophy. There is also a little bit of an elaboration on philosophical questions and why you should even think of doing philosophy at all, the value of philosophy, that is. So if you listen and watch that content and follow up on the leadings in the presentation, you would be able to access some good content in terms of reading materials, research that would help your understanding. As was emphasized, the actual philosophizing starts when you reflect on the content and you prescribe and argue and evaluate and assess those views. So we need the content to be able to begin our assessment, yes, but you want to keep in mind that the philosopher's task is not really how well they are able to narrate what someone said or how they can recount and describe and, you know, present what the person said. That is not so much philosophy yet, even at level 100. The philosophy activity proper begins when you analyze, when you examine, when you evaluate, when you interrogate and propose argued positions to the content you have engaged. That is when you start doing philosophy. And I want us to be wary of that, even at this early stage. Okay. So your lecturer and instructor and examiner for this course is Dr. Nancy Miles Balfour, GMP. You have my details on the screen. You would want to treat it with a little bit of caution. You know, I want to be accessible to the many of you as much as I can, together with a team of TAs that will be introduced to you when school is in session officially. Okay. But you would want to recognize that your lecturers do other things. And so if it's urgent and you need to call to clarify something, it's fine. You could send a WhatsApp message anytime, put an email through. Those can be, checked later on. But for calls, if it is not urgent, then you don't call 12 midnight or 11:30 and be asking after what time we are meeting to discuss so and so. No, that is inappropriate. That is unethical. Okay, so on the presentation, you would see ethics, the question of autonomy, and informed consent. And ethics, as was introduced to you in the previous presentation, ethics deals with the question right and wrong, good and bad. So philosophers are asking questions. That's the main preoccupation of the philosophical enterprise. The question asking activity aimed at responding to problems of existence by interrogating the status quo, the presuppositions, the beliefs, with the aim of what? Proposing alternatives where necessary or rationalizing those presuppositions. So it cuts across disciplines. And therefore, when we are asking philosophical questions, we are asking questions about the supposed beliefs that ground institutional uh, uh, actions, whether in politics, whether in law, society, culture, etc., as I said in the previous lecture. So ethical questions are one of them. And this discussion will focus on medical ethics. But we want to tread cautiously, or if you like, we want to move slowly. Like I have said, this is level 100. You are teaching children how to eat. You do not begin with big, heavy blows of Ghanaian banku and uku stew or Nigerian egusi and, and whatever stew. The child might choke. This is just a baby learning to eat. This is a level 100 course, so we will go slowly, very conscious of the fact that people need to fill in a lot of gaps to get understanding. Okay, when school reopens, then we can do substantive discussion. But these are video lectures to help you. Okay, so before we get to even what we have called bioethical or medical ethics, let's go back a bit, 2 steps back to understand ethics again as a branch of philosophy interested in the question of good, bad, right, wrong. What should you have in mind in this lecture? What should we cover? You would have an understanding of ethics. On the screen now, its criteria, not just particular instances of good, right, and wrong, but what it means. What do we mean when we say this is good? The criteria that determines right and good. So we can now find application in particular instances. So when I see a good act, I can say, oh, this is good. It is good to give to the poor. I would only be able to say that if I understand or we have interrogated what goodness means. So the question of ethics is trying to rationalize, expose, reveal, discuss what it means to be good, right, wrong. Is it good to tell a lie to save a life? I can only be able to give a response of a kind to this question if I understand what it means to be good. Ethics and morality on the screen now, you see that we would also cover, hopefully, distinction between ethics and morality, or perhaps where they converge and where we may think of them as divergent, since they are used interchangeably in most contexts. Then we look at the ethical versus the legal and the religious. They are just points of clarification, so you don't confuse the fact that something is legal, that is acceptable by law, or that something is religious. Religion here cutting across all the professions of faith we can think of. The fact that something is legal or religious may not necessarily mean it is ethical. Okay, so we want to establish that before we are seen as confusing the ethical with the religious. Remember, religions are not the only. When we talk about religions, you shouldn't be thinking only of yours. I may be Christian and avowed one of a certain sect, but if you think only in terms of your being Christian or you're being Muslim or you're being traditionalist, you may err, because there may be some beliefs, some practices, some norms that are also coded as religious that you may find abhorrent, you may abhor, you may find abominable. So you have to have an open mind when we engage. Finally, I think we will now have time to look at concepts like critical mindedness, open-mindedness, objectivity, skills that you must adapt as an academic, not even necessarily as a philosopher. You must have an argumentative position, and that is a positive quality when you are enlightened academic. Like being argumentative doesn't mean exchanging words. It means you give grounds to support claims you make. You reason, so you give grounds to support the claim you make, and all that. I want you to be cautious of that here, so that you will know why there is a reason to know that the legal, the religious may not necessarily be ethical, or the ethical, the legal may not necessarily coincide with what one may consider religious. We'll see some examples of that. Then we'll go to the branches of ethics, which is very important. So you know, with just like we looked at the general approaches to doing philosophy, the analytic approach and the speculative approach. I mentioned also what one could call the existential approach, but then you could place that under the analytic mean, where you focus on meanings, definitions, what have you. This is the speculative approach, where you are asking the ultimate questions, normally connected to question of reality. Okay. So in the same way, when we look at ethics, we will be looking at the branches of doing ethics. And then we will introduce the second, if you like, the main topic, the ethical principles of informed consent and patient autonomy. This big medical ethical question will be introduced with what? We will start this discussion with what? An ethical question to set the topic in a context. We want you can learn everything, but we want you to have a certain context in mind when we engage the ethical principles of informed consent and patient autonomy. So the ethical question will be placed there boldly in this presentation to guide our discussion of the topic proper. I would want to warn the class, is the word warn, caution, prompt, maybe, that these questions are meant to help you engage. So you should engage them, so you may see them again, or in their revised form somehow. All right. We have seen ethics as a branch of philosophy that engages questions of right and wrong, good and bad. I have mentioned in the introduction that the concern is with the criteria for determining good and bad, not just instances of what is good and what is bad. So you say, talking back at your supervisor is bad. When you say this, you are only giving me an example, an instance of goodness or badness. Helping grandma with her bag is good. I'm just giving an instance. But when we engage the ethical question of right and wrong, good and bad, we are looking at what it means. Give me the definition, the criteria, so that I can now apply to specific context. And that is what philosophers engage in when we are engaging in the ethical question, or we are doing ethics. So when we hear the code of ethics of this bank, the ethics of the profession, etc., we are looking at what the profession defines as good or bad. So now and then you can contextualize them. Now we also have on the screen a note on what? Using the terms ethics and morality. And oftentimes people have used them interchangeably. Well, to an extent that may not hurt, but then we will need you to look at what Jechi says, that we may use the term ethics when we are connoting the general, principles of right and wrong. It means that it might not be restricted to a specific context. When we say the ethics of the profession, the ethics of teaching, the ethics of medicine, what have you. You see that we are talking about the good and bad, generally speaking. But then oftentimes when we use morality, then we may have a specific context in mind, a religious, cultural, say Ghanaian context. It could be Adventist, witness. It could be Gan Asante, cultural belief, practice. So morality often is connected to a context. So when we say it is immoral, LGBTQ, blah, 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 is immoral, then we are suggesting a context. We are making a moral claim. Now, on the screen, we have what is ethical, necessarily legal or religious? That's a question. The introduction mentioned that also. So I want you to look at some of the declarations where a discussion, then someone would read it. Take note that what is ethical is not necessarily legal, and vice versa. That means if you turn it the other way around, what is legal need not necessarily also be ethical, need not necessarily be right or wrong. It may be acceptable by law, but not right, ethically speaking. So we leave it as a question so that we generate, curiosity. We help you to think through these assumptions. So I would normally not make claims of, I will normally not assert when we are engaging like this. Why? Because this is philosophy and we want people to be able to ground the claims they make. So I do not have to impose what I think on you, but I can argue to show you what I think. Then you would argue to show. Argue just means, like I've said, present a viewpoint, a perspective. That helps for people to see it differently from what they thought they knew. And then they can make a judgment for themselves, an argued position at that. So we would leave them as questions and not as claims, unless we have argued it out and we present it as argued. So look at reflection question 1, showing you that the ethical need not necessarily be the legal. Incest or sexual relations may be legal in certain contexts, you know that. But definitely not in others, at least close home here where we are speaking. Incest, that is a father say having sexual relations, direct sexual relations with a daughter cannot be legal in certain contexts. But in other contexts, they are. You need not mention them. It is your work now to search and find. In other contexts, that is legal, but definitely unethical. That is why it is frowned upon. If someone chooses to marry a goat, for example, or seeks to be the missus of, they marry their snake, like we see all over the place. The person may, capital may, M-A-Y, may not be, committing any crime, legally speaking, by the laws of the land, the books, but may have ethical issues. Okay, I'm just asking. So there's a question over there for your reflection. 2, donating to charity. Looks like it is both legal and ethical. What do you say? I don't know of any. Whenever I talk law, we are talking a nation, a state, so to speak, okay, of a kind. So the laws would permit you to give, and we would all think of it as a good act, a very good act, right act, so to speak. So here, legality and it being ethical coincide, but up here, they don't. Now, hiding Jews in Germany during the World War II, we thought that broke the law because there was a law then that you do not admit Jews. So it was illegal. I'm sure, I'm thinking we may look at civil disobedience if we make the time. But let's engage when school begins because we have a shorter time. We don't want to add too many things that we may not be able to But if we are able to, then we'll look at some of the arguments made by Martin Luther King Jr., for example, in defense of what civil disobedience. Why he thinks you can disobey some laws for a period based on certain conditions. You should meet all those conditions, but you can disobey the laws if those laws are unjust. So he's talking about unjust law. Now, here, hiding Jews in Germany then is seen as what? Illegal at the time, since the law was that do not hide them, but still ethical, right? Okay, still a question for your reflection. Then the fourth one, first degree murder is obviously seen as unethical and illegal. So you see that there isn't any hard and fast rule linking being ethical necessarily to what being legal and vice versa. It could be both. It could be one and not the other. It could be the other and not one. Very important point to establish before we take off. Look out for possible questions on that to respond to. Is the ethical necessarily religious? I'll run through this quickly. Some religious practice, some religions practice human or animal sacrifice. Not too common now, but definitely you cannot vouch for. It's being totally eradicated, especially from the context we find ourselves in, I should say. Okay, so we would have people that practice sacrifice animals, human beings, to their deity or their god, object of worship. It might be very religious because, well, people may appease the gods, and so there will be so much rain and there will be plenty to eat. This is their religious belief, but we might think of it as unethical. If human or even animal sacrifice, not animal that you are killing to eat, but you are burning alive so that there wouldn't be election issues. That's the person's belief. I saw something like that sometime. Animal burnt alive, but it is religious, yet unethical, I think. What do you think? Question. Reflection 2. Honesty in dealings with others. That is considered one of the religious, principles. I don't know how much of it still remains now. We are all working at perfecting our salvation. I nearly said in Christ. Yeah, that's my belief though. So we are all working at perfecting what we believe in. That includes being honest as much as we can. Okay, to religious. And it is also seen as an ethical act, right act, regardless of your religion. Okay. So reflect on these and get more instances of your own that you can defend and argue, to show that what is ethical may not necessarily be religious and vice versa. Okay. Now, branches of ethics. So when we say we are doing ethics, we may be doing meta ethics, where our focus is on how the ethical terms themselves are defined. When we are looking at the nature of the moral discourse. There are references there, take note of them, please. Okay, so where we are concerned with the definition of ethical terms, I told you we'll do analytic philosophy. We are looking at the meanings of terms, etc. So in ethics, when I am interrogating ethical terms, and I'm examining the meaning of terms like good, bad, virtue, the meaning, the language, then I'm doing meta ethics. Okay. Now, when I also ask what it means to say rape is immoral or abortion is wrong, what do you mean when you say abortion is wrong? When I ask that, what kind of abortion are you talking about? The one that affects the mother to be, or the one that has implications on her life? Or you mean what? When we engage in that question of what it means to say that rape is immoral, We are doing meta ethics. Meta means beyond ethics, beyond the raw question of good and bad. We are engaging in meta ethics. So you remember metaphysics, one of the branches of philosophy that we would engage in later on, and find questions and content that are metaphysical in orientation. Okay. So whenever you see meta, beyond metaphysics, beyond the physical, it means we are not talking empirical studies. You will understand empirical in due course. Okay. Here to meta ethics, meanings, terms, how we can justify those claims. Then we can also have the second branch of ethics that deals with what? Normativity. Normative ethics studies, it judges, evaluates, prescribes how people ought to act. See, ought, how they should behave. We interrogate ethical actions and we evaluate. If I look at, you place value, you judge. So look out for these terms when you are giving an exam in any discipline at all. Assess, the view that. Assess means if I'm assessing, what am I doing? I'm shaking you. I'm examining you. Assess. So make an assessment of the view that. That is what the questions demanded. Not just tell me what Miles said. That is narration. That's give an account. You hardly see questions like account for Descartes' view that or account for Socrates' view. Philosophy? No, that is too cheap a question. Not because you are unable to, but account for Google and find that one. So why should we come asking you to recall? Just for that. You could recall bits of the content and then now do the philosophizing. Okay. So evaluate, prescribe, assess, critically examine, open it out. Look at the pros and the cons. Then shake it. And then in most contests, you would have to obviously finish with an argued position. Okay. We can go into more of that later. But normative ethics evaluates and prescribes how people ought to act. Now, the third branch of ethics, we are not talking the branches of philosophy now. We did that earlier. And it is only one branch of philosophy we have taken now, which is ethics, and we are opening it out to look at its various branches. The earlier slide showed us meta-ethics as one of the branches. Then we are now doing normative ethics and applied ethics. So applied ethics is the branch of ethics, look at the name, applied, that addresses real life issues using the principles, that have been engaged, clarified in what, if you like, in meta ethics. So applied ethics, they address questions like euthanasia. Euthanasia means mercy killing, kill me. I'm sick or something on the hospital bed, and it looks like medicine won't be able to help me any longer, but I'm not, quote unquote, officially dead yet, but I am dead, yet I am not dead. So I feel that I may be a nuisance, kill me, mercy killing. So that's euthanasia, abortion, or punishment. When we are making applications of the ethical principles in addressing real life, you see how we are telling real life issues, then we call that applied ethics. All right. Now, if you were consulting with a pharmaceutical company which has mistakenly given wrong drugs out and killed some 90 people, pregnant women, if you like, then just detected that there was an error in the labeling of that drug. You are a consultant on that committee. This is not on the screen, so you should be listening to me if you are able to. Okay, now, what advice would you give and why? I would contextualize it a bit more and present that hopefully as one of our ethical questions too for reflection. But that is how practical the philosophical enterprise is. When the questions are being asked, they are abstracted from the context of actual human life. Why? So you can reflect dispassionately about them. But whether it is in metaphysics or aesthetics or what have you, like I said in the previous presentation, you need to listen to that to be able to access what I build on. That's why I gave some time before posting this new one. So you would have had time to listen. What you shouldn't do is to run ahead of yourself all over the place. You might get confused and be doing deontology consequentialism when you are being asked to do autonomy versus informed consent, for example. They are all ethical questions. So you want to walk in a guided way. Whilst you are exploring, you still always come back to the center of the content that is being given to you so that you do not lose track. So I'm just saying that we will engage that also. It is still an ethical question about what should be done and what the reason should be. Here we are looking at some other thing as we build a foundation for you. So we will engage another ethical question. But for you to see that when you are doing this course, the aim is for practical use ultimately, not just for you to know deontology, consequences, autonomy, beneficence, whatever. Then what? You must use it. It is for us to help solve problems of existence. So on the screen, by now you would have read it, ethics discussion question 1. Bentum's religious persuasion abhors blood transfusions, but doctors believe he would die without a transfusion since he has already been resuscitated twice using CPR after heart attack. Another CPR, in the strong view of his specialist doctors, would be medically futile without the option of a blood transfusion. Yet, Bentum's family head, children, and wife are willing to sign for the transfusion, perhaps because they want him to survive. They want him to live, rather than be stuck to what he believes in and which has guided his life all this while to attract the wealth that he has. you know. So the family is willing to sign on the man's behalf so that he can get help, they think. The man says, I do not want blood transfusion. My faith is against that. The specialist trained to take care of you, whose institution you have come in for help, tells you, we cannot continue giving you CPR without an accompanying, if you like, blood transfusion. We will kill you and our institution will be discredited. But the man insists no transfusion, refuses to sign a do not resuscitate order, but still hopes to live as long as possible. Now that is tough. The doctor brings the issue to the medical ethics committee, which you, my dear student, head. You are the head of that institution. Glory. So it comes to you. You are what? The medical ethics committee head in that institution. Renowned institution at that. So you're a big man there. Your philosophy training got you consultancy job, well-paid international consultant. And here too, you head that committee. And it has come to your table for deliberation and a decision. What will be your decision to resolve this ethical dilemma? Say or ma'am. Will you favor? So there comes content that we are going to engage. But for you to see the relevance of that topic and its engagement, we need a practical context to help you. So look at the terminologies now. Will you, my friend student, favor patient autonomy? That's high, italicized, my special student. We have put that in italics for emphasis. Will you favor patient autonomy over the principle of non-malfeasance? I jokingly mentioned that word non-maleficence so that my students can take note of the spelling. Non-maleficence or non-maleficence. But I think the right pronunciation should be the principle of non-malfeasance. Okay. Would you favor patient autonomy? My autonomy as a patient. Autonomy means what? Simple term. I'm the boss. Will you respect that over the principle of non-malfeasance? Non-malfeasance, simply put, do not cause harm. Non-harm, non-malfeasance. So which one would we choose? My right to choose as the boss of my life, me the patient, or your responsibility as a medical doctor or medical institution to protect me, your patient, from harm? Which one will override the other and why? Do not be in a hurry to say, oh, but no, think through it, reflect, thinker. It doesn't have obvious answers. If it did, it wouldn't be a philosophical question. It requires an argued position that would admit some challenges, some difficulties, and still show some strength for the view taken and reconcile them and make a proposal that is tentatively the case until higher argued positions come in. That is philosophy. That is how you write a philosophical response. You take a view, you raise the counter view, dear friends. You reflect to show that even though these are possible counter responses, my reaction to that objection is this and that and that, for so and so reasons. And then you come to an argued position. You do not write as if your view doesn't have any possible counter. You identify what the disagreeing position would have to say about what you are saying. You anticipate it, bring it out, but you have to have a response to that objection. That is what strengthens your view, not one that sits as if it doesn't have any objection. Then I will do that objection for you when I'm marking and tell you are saying this, but what if this is it? And then your view is weakened and thrown out of court. So what? So will you favor patient autonomy over the principle of non-malfeasance? Would you admit the family decision which is opposed to the decision of the patient himself in the name of ensuring, there comes the third term, beneficence? Beneficence, benefit. That's it. In simple terms, we'll engage it later, but do only that which benefits the patient. Benefits. So as an institution, medical institution, we are obliged ethically to discharge only that which will benefit the patient. And in doing that, we have to ensure that we do not cause harm. The principle of what? Non-malfeasance. And even whilst we ensure beneficence and non-malfeasance, we are also required ethically at the same time to ensure patient autonomy, quote and unquote, too. And that is where the dilemma is. Several ethical dilemmas overlapping. Why? Because if the patient were competent, he or she wouldn't be at the hospital. I'm talking about competent in the matter under discussion. If the patient were, then that patient need not come to the hospital or need not come to that health institution. It could be the herbalist, where the person deals with herbs, traditional healing center. It might even be a spiritualist. I'm speaking spiritualist as in the context of those that believe have the ability to heal. You came to them. You do not have autonomy, perhaps any longer. Or, well, yes, I may have come there, but I still have my autonomy. I'm still me. It is a contentious issue, especially where it is possible for people to play on your supposed mental incapacity, psychological stress to take advantage of you. Should we cut off the tubes? That is a woman in labor, feeling labor pains. Do you want to come through this again? You have 3 children already. I think we should cut it so that you don't have to go through this pain again. This, at the time the woman is in labor, you say, cut it off. Cut everything off. Let me have my peace. You cut it off. Then when the person finishes giving birth, looks up and tells you, why did you cut off my fallopian tubes? You say, but you consented. Consented to what? I was in pain. I was just expressing my pain. Just like I'll say, Kofi Pape. In labor, that is Kofi's father. Kofi Pape. God will punish you for taking me through this pain. That is the woman in labor. After the child is born, she forgets all of that. She's looking for Kofi Papa to engage and laugh. She has forgotten. Perhaps this person speaking here might be speaking from experience. Perhaps. All right. So what? So autonomy, we will engage that this is the substantive topic. I want to end this video so that it will not be too long, and then I'll make the third one that now focuses on informed consent proper. It's a continuation of this. But if you do not listen to this before you engage that, then you don't even know that it's ethics, not metaphysics, not aesthetics, not logic. So let's work that way. Inform your friends who have not yet subscribed or are not yet on the platform. I don't know how else I can access you all into School Europeans. Even if School Europeans, this might be a bit more convenient when we are having Sakai challenges, or when students for some reason haven't been able to get themselves registered yet. There are quite a number who may still be finding their way around school fees and all. We are not oblivious of that. So this can be very accessible to all. And so tell them, your colleagues that are not yet there, to get the earlier video, assess it, listen, and take some of the directions I put there that you find useful. Listen to this also. The context is clear. The framework within which we are discussing this is clear. Am I an informed patient, well informed enough to make a decision? Does my psyche help? Could my family's input be admitted if I am supposedly mentally unwell? Should their view be admitted? Could it be that they want their way so they can have access to my property? Or they actually do not want to see me in such a distressed manner, unable to do anything. And so they wish that you let him go home quietly. Euthanasia. Now, could the medical practitioner or the competent other take some bribe and, under the guise of medical speciality, send someone home quietly? You see, these are aspects to the issue that makes it important to uphold patient autonomy. Let the patient decide. Yet, if the patient is not competent enough to make a decision, non-malfeasance, you will cause harm. You will break this principle of non-malfeasance. Take the medicine 2-3 times. When I take it, I run. The family becomes amused. I'll take it 1-4 times. Can that be admitted? Non-malfeasance. We hold our babies down sometimes and force them, quote and unquote, to eat or take that medicine because they think they know better, but we feel they are non-competent enough. Our patients, elderly patients, also children, can they be managed that way? Principle of non-malfeasance. Yet at the same time, you are supposed not just don't cause harm, but you are obliged to do that which will benefit the patient. Principle of beneficence. Now that is substantively engaging for now. I will end this video, presentation 2, and then follow it up with the next. Bring your questions if you have any. Continue to keep safe. And remember, all things are possible if you put your mind to it. I can only wish you well. Till later. All the best.